You wouldn't have survived the Viking Age. Imagine this. You open your eyes, and instead of your cozy bedroom, you're in a low, smoky, one-room longhouse. It's dark, it's damp, and it smells like wet fur, old fish, unwashed bodies, and the faint tang of blood. That's not a metaphor. It's actual blood. Because last night, someone butchered a goat in the corner. Why? Because you needed food. And nothing in this century comes gift-wrapped. You blink, you cough, you reach for your phone. But there is no phone, no light switch, no soft sheets, no Spotify to ease you into the day. There's only cold air, a lice-infested cloak, and a stranger's elbow in your ribs. Welcome to 9th century Norway. You're not a Viking warrior, not a shield maiden, not a god descended from Asgard. You're just another warm body trying to not freeze to death before breakfast. You're a nobody, a thrall, a farmer, a foreigner, and that makes you vulnerable. Still think you'd thrive in the Viking Age? Let's walk through your day and find out. You wake up on a straw mattress that crunches when you move. Why? Because it's full of lice, dirt, and the remnants of whatever small creature died in there last week. There's no mattress topper, no pillow, just straw, wood, and the occasional rat. You're sharing this with at least 5 other people, maybe more, depending on how generous your host is. You're not in your own house. You don't even have a house. You're staying in the side lodge of a minor jarl's compound. And by staying, we mean working until your fingers bleed. Your first thought isn't coffee. It's fire. Because it's freezing. You slept in your clothes because you had no choice. There's only one set, and it hasn't been washed since the last rainstorm turned the river into sludge. You shake off the frost. Literally. And you crawl toward the hearth. There is no fire. The embers are cold. Someone forgot to keep it going. That's a mistake, a deadly one. Fire means life. No fire means no breakfast, no warmth, and no cooking the spoiled fish you were supposed to dry yesterday. You step outside to relieve yourself. Where? The woods. Behind a tree. Into the fjord if you're feeling fancy. There is no bathroom, no privacy, and absolutely no toilet paper. Moss is your best friend. And if you're unlucky, frozen moss. Once you're done, you try not to slip on the ice as you head to the stream to get water. Except the stream is frozen. Again. Now you're trying to crack it open with a rock. That rock slips. Your hand goes numb. Congratulations. You have frostbite. And it's not even sunrise yet. Breakfast? If you're lucky, it's thin barley porridge. No milk, no honey, no cinnamon. Just whatever you could scrape together from the communal pot, which has been sitting by the hearth for the past 3 days, absorbing smoke, bugs, and disappointment. You eat it with your fingers, or maybe with a wooden spoon that's been used so long it's permanently stained with soup and sorrow. If you're a thrall, you wait until everyone else eats first. Then you scrape the pot. No seconds, no complaints, not unless you want to get whipped for insubordination. And what are you wearing? Wool. Thick, scratchy, unwashed wool. Underwear, if you're rich. Shoes? Maybe. Leather ones with holes that let in more water than they keep out. If you're poor, you're barefoot. Your soles are cracked. Your toes purple. And if you step on a sharp rock, there's no antibiotic waiting for you. Just a slow, painful infection that could kill you by next week. Now the work begins. You chop wood. You haul water. You dig. You sow. You cook. You salt fish. You drag heavy nets out of the freezing sea and pray you don't slip and fall in. Because if you do, there's no rescue. Only screaming. Only cold, only silence. The sea is merciless. It gives and it takes. And today, it's mostly taking. Every muscle in your body hurts. You're 19. You look 40. Your hands are calloused. Your teeth are rotten. Your breath smells like fermented cabbage and failure. And the worst part? You're still considered one of the lucky ones, because you're not dead. Yet. Now imagine you're a woman. Your job isn't just physical labor. It's also raising children, constantly. In a one-room house with smoke in your eyes and lice in your hair. You nurse a baby while stirring a pot, while sewing a tunic, while cleaning fish. There's no rest, no day off. And childbirth, that's a gamble. No doctors, no midwives if you live too far from a village. No pain relief, just screams, blood, and the hope that the gods are in a good mood today. And if they're not, you die, or your baby does, or both. Then you go back to work, but maybe you're not a farmer. Maybe you were captured, because Vikings didn't just trade goods. They traded people. You were raiding England and got caught. You were in the wrong village at the wrong time. Now you're chained. Now you're property. You're put to work until your body breaks. Or you're sold. Or you're killed. And nobody remembers your name. You're not a hero. You're not a legend. You're a shadow in someone else's saga. Still think you'd survive? Let's talk about religion. You better know the names of Odin, Thor, Freya, and Loki. Not because you're spiritual, because everyone else is. And if you don't show the right reverence, they'll assume you're cursed, a witch, a bringer of bad luck. So you bow, you sacrifice, you burn, you kneel in front of wooden idols and whisper prayers with shaking lips because maybe, just maybe, it will stop the disease sweeping through the village. Maybe the gods will bring back the sun. Maybe the crops won't fail this year. You carve runes. You leave offerings. You hope. Because hope is the only thing you don't need to barter. Now comes war. You hear shouting, horns. A longship glides into the fjord like a blade. You are not a warrior. You're a target. They're not here to talk. They're here to take. They want food, silver, livestock, slaves. Maybe you. Your village scrambles. Some run, some hide, some fight with spears and rocks, and the kind of courage that only desperation brings. But it's not enough. The raiders torch the longhouse. They slaughter the old. They chain the young. You watch your world burn. And if you survive, it's only because someone decided you might be useful. As bait, as labor, as leverage. Night falls. You're shaking from cold, from hunger, from memory. You have no roof, no kin. You eat something that might be bread or might be mold. You don't ask. You just chew. Because asking gets you nothing. Because this is survival, not dignity. You curl up next to the dying embers and listen to the wind howl like it knows your name. And still, there is tomorrow. This isn't Skyrim. There's no pause, no stat boost, no magic potion. There's just pain, work, hunger, cold, fear, and the possibility, no, the likelihood, that you won't see next spring. Because death doesn't knock here. It kicks the door in. Plague? It's everywhere. Cold? It's in your bones. Violence? It lives down the road and drinks with your neighbors. And the gods? They're watching. But they're not helping. So tell me, would you have survived the Viking Age? No, you wouldn't have. Not even for a week. Not because you're weak, but because the Viking Age didn't reward strength. It rewarded brutality, endurance, cruel cunning, and luck. So much luck, and even then, It rarely ended well. You would have died in the cold, or on the sea, or in childbirth, or on someone's sword, or simply from drinking the wrong cup of water. And even if you didn't, no one would sing of your life. No skald would chant your name. Because you weren't a legend, you were just another body. Another life that flickered and went out. Unmarked, unremembered, still romanticizing the Viking Age, still dreaming of battle axes and longships. Then maybe you need to read this again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll whisper a quiet thank you tonight when you flush your toilet, sip clean water, turn on the heater, and climb into your soft, safe, mattress-covered bed. Because you live in a world your ancestors would have called heaven. And the Viking Age? That was hell, with a horned helmet. You wouldn't have survived the Viking Age. Let's not sugarcoat it. You wouldn't have lasted a day. Not because you're soft, not because you're weak, but because you've been raised in a world with heated floors, painkillers, Google and coffee on demand. And now, without warning, you're thrown into a place that knows nothing of comfort, nothing of mercy, and nothing of you. The air bites. The sky presses. The earth does not care. Welcome to the Viking world. It's not all longships and mead halls. It's mud, smoke, silence, and brutality. And in this tale, you're not the hero. You're the test subject. So let's run the experiment. What happens when a modern soul meets the Old North? Imagine the worst winter you've ever lived through. Multiply it. Now remove your jacket, your boots, your insulation, and your thermostat. Welcome to the Scandinavian peninsula in the 9th century, where the sun forgets to rise for months at a time, where the wind cuts like bone, and where the forests close around you like a trap. Your house, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a wooden hut. Not charming, not rustic. A cube of cold with walls that sweat and a roof that leaks. There's a hole in the ceiling, not for aesthetic, but so the smoke from the central hearth can escape. That hearth is your only heat source. No firewood, no warmth. No warmth? You die. Every breath you take is damp. Every surface is wet. The ground outside is either frozen solid or a muddy bog. Inside, it smells like wood smoke, wet wool, and whatever creature was last butchered. The light? There is none. You live by tallow lamp and flickering flame, your eyes constantly straining against the gloom. Vitamin D deficiency? That's your new baseline. Depression? Not diagnosed, just called melancholy and cured by prayer or hard labor. The wind screams at night, and the cold doesn't wait for you to be old or weak. It just comes. Are you ready to sleep on straw soaked in ice water? Are your lungs ready for years of smoky air? Can your skin withstand months of damp leather, wool and fleas? If not, don't worry. You'll be dead before summer. If you even make it that far, you've arrived. But no one cares. You have no name, no kin, no land. And that means you have no value. The Viking social order is tight and merciless. At the top are the Jarls, lords of men, masters of land, born into privilege and polished with iron. Below them, the Karls and free farmers, craftsmen, warriors, the backbone of society, respected if not rich. Then come the Drottens, the war bands, the housecarls, the fighting men who keep the peace and break it when ordered. Beneath them all, the thralls. Slaves, human property. Bought, sold, beaten, worked until they collapse. That's your likely destination. Because you're a stranger, you don't speak the language, You don't know the customs. You're not sworn to anyone. And in the Viking world, that means you're nothing. A body, a burden, a thing. You might be captured in a raid. You might be punished for theft. You might be born to a thrall mother. No matter how you got there, the chains around your wrists don't ask. You'll haul stone, carry dung, clean after animals, and be reminded every hour that your life belongs to someone else. And if you dare to run, they'll carve runes into your flesh so everyone knows you're a fugitive. That is, if they don't simply cut your throat. Still think you'd rise through the ranks? Think again. This isn't a game. This isn't a saga. This is survival. And if you're lucky, your name will be remembered in a whisper. But probably not. Forget everything you know. You think Viking women were powerful? That's only half the truth. Yes, they had more freedom than their European contemporaries. They could own land, file for divorce, run farms while their husbands were raiding. But power, that came with blood, with lineage, with status. Are you a foreign woman? Then you are vulnerable, a target. If you're taken in a raid, you become a thrall, a concubine, a breeder. You will be traded like a cloak, expected to birth children who aren't yours, raise them in a language you don't understand, and thank the gods you weren't tossed into the sea. Even free-born Viking women are not equals. They may have keys to the household, but they are still under male authority. Fathers, husbands, brothers. Their job is to preserve honor, maintain the hearth, and survive childbirth again and again until their bodies break. There are no hospitals, no prenatal care, no anesthesia, just blood, fire, and prayer. One bad turn, and you bleed out on straw while the village priest whispers the names of the gods. And if you speak too loudly, if you argue, if you step outside your role, you're a threat, a witch, a problem to be corrected, with fire, exile, or worse. The sagas may remember women who picked up the sword, but those were exceptions. You're not Lagertha, you're not Freydis, you're the nameless woman who died in the dark, forgotten by morning. Coins? Rare. Gold? For kings? Your life runs on barter and blood. You trade furs, fish, slaves, and salt. Everything has value. Everything has risk. You want a cloak? Hunt the fox. You want bread? Work the field. You want respect? Spill blood for it. The economy is tied to raids. Plunder, ransom, loot. You think those longships were for scenic river tours? They were floating death machines, built for speed, shock, and slaughter. If you're not rowing, you're raiding. If you're not raiding, you're waiting to be raided. And in between, you work. You build boats. You dry cod. You spin wool. You sharpen weapons. You carve runes into bone by firelight, hoping your gods are still listening. There is no weekend. There is no wage. Only labor. Only trade. Only survival. You better believe. Not because you're devout, because everyone is watching. Viking religion is blood and bone. The gods are not kind. Odin demands wisdom bought with pain. Thor drinks from the skulls of giants. Loki laughs as the world burns. There are no easy prayers, only sacrifices, offerings, oaths, rituals govern everything. You need rain? Sacrifice a goat. You want victory? Sacrifice a man. Blood on the stone, smoke to the sky, and still, maybe nothing. The dead are buried with grave goods to help them in the afterlife, and sometimes with their servants, alive or dead. If you die dishonorably, you don't go to Valhalla. You go to Hell, the cold, grey land of forgotten souls. There are no guarantees, just hopes. Just rituals, and just the whispering fear that even your gods have abandoned you. You think a cold is bad? Try a toothache that turns into sepsis. Try a splinter that becomes gangrene. Try a fever that cooks your brain while the village healer bleeds you with a bone knife. There is no doctor. There is no germ theory. There are herbs, chance and desperation. Baths, rare. Soap, primitive. You stink. Everyone does. Lice are your constant companions. Your skin cracks in winter and blisters in summer. Your joints ache. Your back is curved by 30. And when death comes, it's fast, or slow, or random. But it always comes. Still romanticizing the Viking world? Still imagining yourself with a horned helmet, standing tall on a cliff, wind in your beard, axe in hand? You wouldn't have been the warrior. You would have been the thrall cleaning the warrior's boots, or the woman forced into his bed, or the corpse left unburned after the next raid. So tonight, when you close your eyes, be grateful for the warmth, for the glass in your window, for the food that doesn't kill you, for the silence that doesn't mean danger, because you live in a world where you don't have to fight every day to keep your name, your body, your soul. The Viking Age was real, and it was brutal. It was not a fantasy. It was not a costume. It was cold steel, old gods, and endless winter. You wouldn't have survived the Viking wilderness. Not for a day. Not for a night. Not even for an hour if it was February. The wind was screaming off the fjord, and your fire had just gone out. Forget everything you know about camping, hiking, survival shows, and all those tutorials you watched once and bookmarked. They won't save you here, because this isn't a simulation. This is survival as it was lived for centuries, in bone-cracking cold, with no safety net, no mercy, and no second chances. Welcome to nature's first blow, the one that doesn't ask if you're ready, the one that just hits. This is how the Vikings survived, and this is why you wouldn't. Let's start with breakfast. The kind of breakfast that makes you want to go back to sleep and never wake up. There's no coffee, no granola, no eggs. There's a wooden bowl with something inside it that looks like it died twice and smells like it regrets being born. Congratulations, it's the breakfast of the champion, a slab of all-rotted whale meat, buried underground for months, fermented until it stings your nose and makes your teeth ache before it even touches your tongue. Harkal, if you're lucky. If not, it's boiled bark bread. Yes, bread made from tree bark, ground and stretched with sawdust and rye husk. There's also a bit of seaweed if the tide was kind, and maybe a dried fish head or two. You chew it with the same enthusiasm as gnawing a wooden shoe. It's not a meal. It's a punishment you swallow, and if you're not used to it, your stomach will stage a violent rebellion. But you have no choice. This isn't about taste. This is about staying vertical. Because if you collapse, no one picks you up. They just step over your body and keep walking. You think that's bad? That's just the forhudor, start of the day. Now you have to move, outside, into the open, into nature. But this isn't a green, sun-drenched forest from a storybook. This is the Norse wild, and it is not your friend. The snow is knee-deep. The wind is sharp enough to cut skin. And the cold, oh, the cold. It's not an inconvenience. It's a predator. It waits, it watches, and the second your fire dies, it moves in for the kill. Without fire, death. There is no maybe. There is no, let me just grab a blanket. If your embers fade and you can't get the flame going again, because your hands are numb, because the wind is too strong, because the wood is wet, you die. Slowly, then quickly, your toes blacken, your breath becomes mist, your vision tunnels, and then nothing. That's your last February. Without fur, death. You think your synthetic coat would help? It wouldn't last a week. The Vikings wore layers of wool and fur, hardened leather cloaks, and cloaks made from reindeer hide. Real warmth, real weight, real stink. And even then, the wind still found its way through. If you're caught outside in your modern hoodie and sneakers, you're already dead. The wolves are just deciding when. Without community, death. You don't survive alone. Not here, not ever. Viking survival was communal. If you didn't contribute, you didn't eat. If you couldn't chop wood, gut fish, carry stone, you were a liability. And liabilities in a Norse winter get left behind. That's not cruelty. That's math. Resources are limited. Firewood runs out. Food spoils. One person slowing down the entire group could mean Warsa everyone dies. So you work, you pull your weight, or you vanish, and no one carves your name into the stones. Now let's talk about food preservation, because even if you somehow find food, if your nets catch something, if your traps snap shut, if you stumble upon a carcass, you're not done. You need to man-preserve it. Because the next meal might not come for days or weeks. The Vikings salted everything they could. Salt was precious, expensive, hoarded. If you had it, you used it to rub down fish, meat, even seaweed. Salt pulls the water out, keeps rot away, keeps you alive. But if you used too little, the rot came anyway, and you learned the hard way, chewing moldy meat in the dark, while praying you wouldn't spend the next 2 days vomiting your soul into a ditch. They smoked what they couldn't salt. The long houses were thick with smoke, not just because of poor ventilation, but because above the hearth, meat hung. Fish strung like garlands, boar strips drying into jerky. Everything smelled like ash and blood. But it worked. Smoke killed the bacteria, kept death out of your stomach for another week. And in the deep, cold months, they'd froze it. Outside, in the open, buried beneath snow, pressed under stone. Nature was the refrigerator, and you had to use it. If you didn't know how to store food, if you didn't wrap it right, if animals got to it, you didn't eat in February. And if you didn't eat in February, you didn't see March, because hunger isn't poetic in the Viking world. It's not a sad song. It's a corpse in a hut. It's children crying until they stop. It's a mother feeding her last piece of dried trout to the baby while her fingers shake from starvation. And still, the fire must be fed. The wood must be chopped. The nets must be dragged through freezing water. There is no pause button, no break, just survival, just pain. They ate what they had. Roots dug from frozen ground. Bitter, black, knotted things that left your tongue numb and your throat sore. Grain pottage, if they had grain. More often, fish. So much fish. Cod, herring, whale blubber if you were near the sea. Sea urchins, dried seaweed, birds' eggs stolen from cliffs, seal meat, boiled bones. And if the winter was especially cruel, they boiled leather, softened it into chewable glue, and ate their own shoes. Every calorie was earned. Every meal was survival. There were no snacks, no feasts, just chewing through another mouthful of misery while snow gathered at the door. Still think you'd manage? Still imagine yourself huddled in a fur cloak, grinning beside the hearth, telling stories like a true Norse hero? Let's be clear. You don't know the taste of fermented shark and desperation. You've never eaten bread made from bark and wept from the bitterness. You've never tried to light a fire with numb fingers while frost crept into your bones. You've never buried a neighbor who starved to death, holding a piece of dried fish they were saving for their child. You've never sat through a night where the only sound was the wind whispering, and you weren't sure who would be alive come morning. The first blow isn't war, it's nature, it's hunger, it's cold, and it's cruel. If you don't understand how to fight it, how to respect it, how to bend to its rules, you die. Not heroically, not epically, just quietly, in the dark, and someone else eats your share of the whale meat. Still dreaming of being a Viking? Then welcome to your first test. It's February. The wind is rising, the fire is dying, and dinner smells like hell. You wouldn't have survived the Viking way of war. Because war for the Norse wasn't just an act. It wasn't just a season, a duty, a response. It was existence. It was the breath between harvests, the rhythm of the sea, the murmur behind prayers to gods of war and death. If you lived in Viking society, you didn't ask if you'd fight. You asked when and how long you'd last. Let's destroy your fantasy up front. Viking isn't a job title. It's not something you apply for. It's not a role in a cosplay event. Going a Viking was a way of being, a choice, a calling, a sentence. It meant leaving your home, your family, your warmth, and throwing yourself into uncertainty. Storm, steel, slaughter. Not all Norse were Vikings by name, but all of them, all, lived under the looming shadow of war. You didn't have to be a warrior to bleed like one, because the battlefield could come to you, in the form of foreign raiders, local feuds, blood debts, ambushes, clashes over farmland, women, pride, and words whispered too loudly at the wrong feast. If you were a man, you would fight. If you were a woman, you would fight. If you were old, wounded, poor, cornered, you would fight, even if no one gave you a sword, even if you had nothing but your fists and the leg bone of a dead goat. Because if you didn't fight, you died. Weapons, equipment, fighting style. Do you know how to hold a sword? A real one, not the one in your video game inventory, not the replica on your wall. A sword that weighs more than your arm, unbalanced, dull from rust, slick from blood. Can you swing it after 3 hours of marching through bog water? Can you hold your shield against the hammering of another man trying to turn your skull into soup? Most likely no. But that's not even the standard. That's the bare minimum. You'd be lucky to even have a sword, because swords were expensive, and most fighters didn't carry them. You got an axe, a tool before it was a weapon. Heavy, brutal, clumsy, unless you've practiced since childhood. Or you got a spear, a length of wood with a sharp end, meant for thrusting, for lunging, for killing from behind a shield wall. And then there was the shield, round, wooden, painted with runes or raw animal blood. It was your lifeline. It absorbed shock. It deflected arrows. It was the difference between standing and bleeding. But it broke, often. And when it did, you were exposed. You were meat. Now imagine the enemy, not just a man, a stutt berserker. A lunatic of the battlefield. A warrior who had chewed on fly agaric mushrooms until his blood boiled and his mind shattered into screams. He comes at you naked to the waist, frothing, biting his own tongue. He doesn't block. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't fear death because he already sees Valhalla. You try to strike. He charges through your swing and buries a rusted axe into your side. That's your opponent. And he's not the worst one. The worst is the cold, calculating fighter. The one who grew up training from age 7. A child who learned to throw rocks and then spears, to wrestle brothers in mud, to bleed for fun, to sharpen blades as a lullaby. By 12, he's gone on his first raid. By 16, he's killed a man. By 20, he's lost half his friends and all his mercy. And he sees you, a newcomer, a soft soul from another age, and he smiles, because this isn't war for him. This is Tuesday. Training for battle. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a warrior. You were raised into it. Boys were taught to use knives before they could read, if they ever learned to read. They trained with wooden swords, chased wild dogs for stamina, carried buckets of stones up hills until their shoulders screamed. They fought each other in play until the line between sparring and real injury blurred into scar tissue. They practiced shield walls until their arms ached and their fingers bled. And when the time came, they were thrown into actual combat, not with safety nets, but with expectation. No excuses, no delays. You either killed or you watched your village burn. Do you have calluses? Do your knuckles ache when you grip a hilt? Can you carry a shield taller than your torso? Can you stab forward 100 times in formation while a man behind you screams that your line is breaking? Can you listen to the crunch of bone and still move? Because that's what's waiting. Not glorious duels. Not poetic victory. Death. How they died on the battlefield. You want to know what dying in a Viking battle looked like? Not fast, not clean, not cinematic. You don't fall with a whisper and close your eyes peacefully. You scream, you wail, you choke on your own blood. Your guts fall into the mud. Your face is trampled. Your teeth are scattered. If you're lucky, someone finishes you. If not, you lay there with a broken spine while the crows gather. The battlefield smells like sweat, fear, shit, and iron. And after the battle, the looting begins. They take your boots, your cloak, your blade, if you had one, maybe your ears for a trophy. Your body stays where it fell. Maybe someone burns it. Maybe not. Maybe you rot. Maybe you freeze. Maybe you're eaten. This is not a noble end. This is rot in the snow. No honor without survival. And yet, it was worshipped. This pain, this blood, this life. The Norse believed that dying in battle was the ticket to Valhalla. The gods watched the fights, chose the bravest, plucked them from the carnage, and gave them new life. That's the hope that drove them. That's the fire behind every berserker's scream. But belief doesn't stop pain. Hope doesn't plug a wound. Even the chosen bled. Even the brave screamed. So what about you? You were raised with warnings, with safety rails, with systems. The Vikings were raised with war, with fire and blood, with the understanding that survival wasn't a right. It was earned with sweat and screams. You didn't train at 7. You didn't butcher a man at 14. You didn't bury your brother after his first raid and still pick up your spear for the next one. You weren't meant for this world. You weren't made for its rhythm, its brutality, its silence after the kill. Still think you'd survive. Still think you'd stand in the shield wall, shoulder to shoulder, fearless and firm. Still imagine raising your axe and screaming to Odin? Then take your place. The war horn sounds. The ground shakes. And death begins. Let's see how long you last. You wouldn't have survived the Viking household. And not because of war, not because of raiding, not even because of the cold, the hunger, or the gods, but because of something quieter, meaner, closer. Something that didn't come from the sea or the battlefield, but from inside the home, from the very walls where people were supposed to be safest. Domestic violence wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a shame. It was a rule, a structure, a part of life. And you, modern, sensitive, raised on laws and therapy, wouldn't have lasted a single blow. Because in Viking society, violence was everywhere. Not just on the long ships or in foreign villages. It seeped into the soil of the home. It clung to the rafters. It sat at the table. A man ruled his household, not just with responsibility, but with iron. And when he struck his wife, his child, his thrall, it wasn't considered madness. It was considered order. You want a historical example? Picture this. A wife burns the bread. A child forgets the tools outside. A servant speaks without permission. There's no conversation, no time out. There's only pain, a slap, a shove, a beating with a belt, or worse. And no one interferes. No neighbor calls the guard. No priest offers counsel. This is his house, his domain, his right. You say that's barbaric? In their eyes, you're the fool. You're the one who doesn't understand the cost of survival. Now imagine you're the wife, the daughter, the slave. You breathe quietly, move silently, because you know the rules aren't written. They're felt. Stepped on once, and the consequences are immediate, permanent. There are no appeals, no judges, no mediators. If a man says you're guilty, you are. And what follows isn't symbolic, it's literal. Punishment, raw, ruthless, final. Let's say you committed one. What was it? Theft, lying, sleeping with someone you shouldn't have, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time? You won't get a trial. You won't get a lawyer. You'll get a sentence. Blood, iron, exile. Maybe they cut off a finger, or brand your forehead with a rune that tells everyone what you did. Maybe they throw you out, into the cold, into the wild, naked, but for your shame. Or maybe they bind you, drag you into the center of the village, and perform the sentence in front of your neighbors, your family, your children. The justice system didn't ask questions. It demanded blood. And if you couldn't pay, your body would. Did you insult a noble? You might lose your tongue, kill a man, then be ready to die unless you can pay his family with silver or land or your own freedom. And if you couldn't, there was a simpler option. The Norse called them thralls. And it wasn't always about war. You didn't have to be captured in battle. You could be born a thrall, or sold into it by your family, or fall into it after one mistake, one debt, one accusation, one breath too loud in the wrong hall. You go to sleep a free person. You wake up with chains around your wrists. Once you're a thrall, you are punor, not a person. You're property. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't sit at the table. You eat scraps from the floor. If you eat at all, you sleep in the barn. If it's full, you sleep tied to a post. If you're a woman, your body is not yours. It is taken when someone wants it. And if you fight back, that's another crime, another punishment, more pain, less hope. You work until your fingers crack, until your back is crooked, until your knees give out. And even then, there's no mercy. You keep working, or you die, and someone else replaces you. Because there are always more thralls, from raids, from debt, from betrayal. Can you even imagine that? Living in a stall, eating from a dog's dish, sleeping with a leather belt around your neck so you can't run. And if you try to escape, they chase you, hunt you, drag you back, and then they make an example out of you. Some say, well, the Norse weren't cruel, that their system had rules, that they respected strength and honored oaths. And yes, there were rules, but those rules were written by the ones with swords, the ones with power. And if you didn't have either, your rights were as thin as a breath in winter. Your fate was in someone else's hands, their mood, their temper, their patience. Still romanticizing it? Still picturing mead halls and songs by the fire? Then remember this. Behind every glowing hearth, there was someone who feared the man sitting beside it. Behind every feast, someone bled in the kitchen. Behind every raid, a mother waited to learn if her son would return whole or maimed or never. This was a world where pain wasn't an exception. It was a method, a tool, a routine. Domestic violence wasn't hidden. It was normalized. It was structure. It was tradition. You lived inside it. You passed it on. You called it discipline. You called it law. You wrapped it in myth and legend and gods, and still it broke people. So if you think you'd have survived the Viking world, ask yourself, what would you have done the first time someone hit you and no one helped? What would you have done when they chained your wrist for a mistake you didn't understand? What would you have done when the law said, you're guilty, and you had no voice to answer? You wouldn't have survived Viking medicine. Not for a day, not for an injury, not for a splinter, a stomachache, a twisted ankle, or a bad cough. Because Viking medicine wasn't healing. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't even science. It was pain dressed as ritual, hope disguised as horror, and survival balanced on the edge of a rusted blade. There were no hospitals, no antiseptics, no pills, no pharmacies, no white coats, just smoke, superstition, steel, and screaming. You didn't go to a healer to get better. You went there to bargain with death. Let's say you cut your hand, just a scratch, a slice from a fishbone or a blade. In your world, it's nothing. A bandage, some ointment, maybe a day off. In the Viking world, it's a coin toss, because that tiny wound, it's now a festering door for death to walk through. There are no antibiotics, no understanding of bacteria, no concept of sterilization. Your cut is washed in water that's already filthy, maybe wrapped in wool, maybe rubbed with garlic or spit or pig fat. And if it starts to swell, turn black, smell wrong, that's not just infection, that's a sentence. You've been marked, and unless the gods are bored and merciful, you are going to die. Treatment of disease, potions, leeches, prayers. Your fever won't break. You're shaking, shivering, sweating in the night. Your bones ache. Your gut twists. What do? They give you a potion, not brewed in glassware, but in a wooden bowl caked with the residue of last week's dinner. What's in it? Ash? Bark? Mold? Fermented roots? Boiled urine? Maybe dried herbs hung from the rafters by a man who once saw a raven fly west and called it a sign. You drink it. You gag. It burns. You vomit. And they say that means it's working. Then come the Sirlichasaswar. Slimy, hungry, eager, placed on your skin to suck out the bad blood. Because the problem isn't your immune system, it's your balance of humors. Too much blood, too much bile, too much spirit, too little wind. The logic doesn't matter. The outcome does. You get weaker, dizzy. The fever climbs. They add more leeches, more prayers. You can barely breathe. and someone's drawing runes on your chest with soot and whispering to Thor. You beg for help. They tell you to pray harder, to cleanse your sins, to confess your lust, your pride, your jealousy, because surely this isn't just illness, this is punishment. You're cursed, or haunted, or being tested. The healer mutters, spits, burns sage. Nothing changes. The pain only deepens, but they keep going, not to save you, just to say they tried. Operations without anesthesia. Still think you'd make it? Let's say you're stronger, braver. You take a deep wound to the leg in battle. You survive the fight, but now the leg is swelling. Green, numb. It smells like rot. The pain is constant, unbearable, but oddly dull. That's not good. That's your nerves dying. The healer says the limb is lost. Amputation is the only choice. But remember, there's no anesthesia, no morphine, no sedatives, no numbness, just pain war. And the bone knife that's been hanging on the wall for years, crusted in history and rust. They tie you down. They pour alcohol over your face, not to clean, but to try to dull your screams. And then they cut. Not quickly. Not cleanly. They saw through skin, muscle, tendon. They use a hammer to crack the bone. They don't stop for your begging. They don't pause when your eyes roll back. They finish the job. Maybe you live. Most don't. Infection follows. Blood loss follows. Shock follows. And if you're lucky, you die before the wound writhes with maggots. If you're not lucky, you spend the next week rotting alive while your family sings to you and pretends you're already in Valhalla. Still think you're strong? Then let's go deeper. Cranial surgery. Drilling the skull. Trepanation, a word that should never need to exist, but in the Viking world it was real, a hole, cut into the skull. With what? A chisel, a sharp stone, a metal awl. They believed it could release demons, ease pressure, cure madness, and maybe it did. Or maybe it just silenced the screaming. There are skulls with holes in them, real ones. Some healed, some didn't. Imagine being awake while someone drills through your head with a tool that doesn't even have a handle. No sedation, no knowledge of anatomy, just a strong arm and belief. The noise, the crunch, the pressure. The brain doesn't have nerves, but everything around it does. You feel the skin tear, the bone split. You hear your own skull echo. And you survive, or you don't. And either way, the ritual is complete. Pain was a habit, not an event. You don't understand Viking pain, because pain in your world is a message, a signal, something to address, to stop. In the Viking world, pain was life. It wasn't a sign of something wrong. It was proof you were still here. Pain was daily, constant, chronic. You learned to work through it, fight through it, carry it like a pouch of stones on your belt. Children were beaten into resilience. Women endured childbirth without even the idea of relief. Warriors fought through infection, through wounds, through frostbite, because to complain was to admit weakness. And weakness? That got you nothing. No sympathy, no reward. Just another funeral by the fjord. There was no concept of mental health, no name for trauma. You had nightmares? That was the gods warning you. You had anxiety, you were cursed, you had hallucinations, possessed. Everything was mystical. Everything was fatal. You didn't recover. You just kept going, or you stopped going, and the snow buried you. Still think you'd survive. You wouldn't. You wouldn't even make it to your first fever. You'd cry at the first incision. You'd beg for help when help didn't exist. You'd plead for mercy in a language that only gods understood, and they didn't answer, because Viking medicine wasn't care. It was chaos. Blood and bone and guesswork. Pain wasn't an emergency. It was Tuesday. So the next time you pop a pill or rinse a wound or sleep through a migraine in a warm, quiet room, remember this. You're alive because you were born in the right century. The Vikings lived in medical hell. And you'd be the first to fall. You wouldn't have survived the Viking gods. Because in the Viking Age, faith wasn't comforting. It wasn't gentle. It didn't cradle you through loss or whisper peace into your dreams. Faith commanded. It watched. It bled. The Norse gods were not saviors. They didn't offer salvation or forgiveness. They made deals. They made demands. They tested you. And if you failed, they punished you. Not in the afterlife, but here, now, in the wind that shattered your roof, the plague that took your child, the axe that met your neck when you hesitated on the battlefield. You don't pray to Odin. You offer. You prove. You suffer. You think belief is something private? Something whispered before bed. Think again. In Viking society, religion was public, physical, and constant. You couldn't walk through a village without passing carved idols, wooden stairs, stained with age, animal blood at their feet. You couldn't eat, sleep, marry, or sail without a ritual. The gods were everywhere. They lived in the trees, in the storms, in the silence before dawn. They were watching. And if you acted like they weren't, you died. You can't fool Odin. Odin, the All-Father, one-eyed, cloaked in shadows, hung himself from the world tree to gain knowledge, sacrificed himself to himself. A god of war, wisdom, death, and secrets. Not kind, not distant. He was watching you, always. If you lied, if you showed cowardice, if you kept a part of yourself hidden during battle. He knew. And he remembered. You don't get into Valhalla with good intentions. You get in with blood, with bravery, with fire in your eyes, and death in your teeth. If you died in battle, weapon in hand, heart open to the gods, you might be chosen. Taken to the great hall, where the walls were made of spears, the roof of shields, and the benches lined with the dead who laughed between feasts and fought every day in preparation for Ragnarok, the final war. But if you died in bed, in sickness, in fear, then no. You don't go to Valhalla, you go to hell. Cold, grey, silent. A realm of shadows and forgotten souls, ruled by a goddess with a corpse's face and no mercy in her eyes. And worse, if you lived too long as a slave, a coward, a nobody, you weren't sent anywhere. You were nothing. Your soul wandered, unspoken, unclaimed, forgotten even by the gods. Most prayed to die in battle. You think people feared death? No, they feared dying. Wrongta. Dying dishonorably. Dying slowly. They prayed not for life, but for a good death. A death that meant something. A death with witnesses and wounds. Because to die with blood on your sword was to earn a seat at the divine table. To die with vomit in your throat and fear in your eyes was to be erased. Vikings would rather fall on their own blade than die in chains. A living slave was lower than a corpse. If captured, many slit their throats, broke their own necks, flung themselves into the sea, not because they were brave, but because they were faithful. Faithful to the code, to the myth, to the gods who demanded it. Sacrifices, rites, rituals. Still think this was all poetry and storytelling? Then stand still, because today you are part of the ritual, a real one, not a tale, not a reenactment. You stand in the ring of stones. The god pole rises above you. draped in red. The priest, cloaked in wolfskin, walks the circle, chanting, arms painted in spirals of ash and blood. You hear the animals nearby, the goats, the pigs, maybe a horse, its breath steaming in the morning cold. And then the silence breaks. They bring the first creature forward. Its throat is slit. The blood is caught in a bowl, still warm. It is splashed on the altar, on the people, on you. It stings your face. The priest shouts the name of a god, Thor, Freyr, Odin, and then another animal dies. Another bowl fills. The ground turns red. The smell is metallic, sweet, rotten, ancient. This isn't symbolic. This is sacrifice, real blood, real death. And if the omens are bad, if the crops fail, if the sea turns against the ships, if the raiders don't return, they won't stop with animals. They look at the slaves, at the captured, at the weak. Sometimes, yes, people were sacrificed, hung from trees, drowned in bogs, stabbed with blades carved with runes. Their blood was believed to open the world, to cleanse it, to feed the gods. And you're not a spectator. You are part of it. You might be the one chanting, or you might be the one chosen. And you are not just a spectator. You are a participant. Religion in the Viking Age was not passive. You didn't just believe. You acted. You sacrificed. You fasted. You bled. You carved runes into bones and whispered them to the night. You carried the dead to their pyres. You burned ships as funerals. You raised your hands in prayer, not with hope, but with fury, begging the gods to notice you, to spare your child, to give your husband strength, to curse your enemy. There were blots, seasonal sacrifices, feasts for the gods. There were Tyler Seder, dark rituals led by women who knew the old magic, bending fate, calling spirits. There were burials with weapons and food and coins, not out of sentiment, but because the dead needed tools for the next world. And if you didn't prepare them properly, they came back, angry, cold, hungry. Still want to live in the Viking Age? Then prepare to kill a goat with your own hands. Prepare to smear blood on your lips and chant names that haven't been spoken in 1,000 years. Prepare to give up your peace of mind, because faith here isn't comfort, it's obligation, it's terror, it's survival. You didn't get to choose what to believe. The world around you chose, the gods chose, and your only job was to prove you were worthy of their gaze, and even then, they might ignore you, because you, modern, soft, hesitant, you don't carry enough blood to be noticed. You don't carry enough rage, you don't carry enough death. And the gods? They don't forgive weakness. You wouldn't have survived the Viking Sea. Let's be honest. You get queasy on a ferry. You complain when the plane hits turbulence. You panic when your Wi-Fi cuts out mid-cruise. And yet you think you would have lasted even a single day at sea with the Vikings? You wouldn't have survived an hour, not because you are weak, but because you are land-bred, warmth-fed, screen-softened. And the North Sea does not tolerate softness. Welcome aboard the Longship. It's not a yacht, it's not a ship. It's a floating coffin, thin, long, low to the water, open to the wind, the rain, the frost, the waves. There is no cabin, no shelter, no privacy. You sleep where you sit. You piss over the side. You hold your weapon in one hand and your stomach in the other. Because the sea, it doesn't care who you are. It churns, it slams, it lifts you up, whispers that you might live, and then drops you again like a god swatting a fly. You think it's romantic? That the Vikings danced across the waves like legends? Let's talk about the reality. Salt water in wounds, rotten legs, no sun, no rest. You've been rowing for hours. Your hands are raw, your shoulders are on fire. The oar is slippery with blood. Your own. The salt gets into your cuts. It burns. It never stops burning. You can't bandage them. You can't stop. If you stop rowing, the current drags you, spins you, capsizes you. If you fall in, the cold paralyzes you in seconds. You don't have time to drown. You just sink. Your feet are soaked, all the time. Boots, if you have them, they're made of stiff leather, chewed through by rot and seawater. Your toes swell, split, turn black. That's not just a blister. That's Bartort, the beginning of the end. Trench foot, infection, amputation, if someone cares enough to take the leg before the rot reaches your heart, which they probably don't. There is no sun, not for days, just grey. Mist, a sky so low you feel like you're sailing beneath the lid of a coffin. Your skin cracks, your lips split, your gums bleed from scurvy, your breath stinks, your beard grows thick with lice and salt, and you keep rowing. Because stopping means dying. You sleep in shifts, if you sleep. If the storm allows it, you curl around your shield like a dog. You dream of firelight, of mead, of dry land. But when you wake, there's only water. Cold, endless, cruel. Still feel heroic? Longship and fear of the sea. The longship was a marvel. Yes, but it was also a death trap. A hull of oak and iron nails, shallow enough to sail up rivers, fast enough or outrun pursuit, light enough to carry over land when the fjords betrayed you. It moved like a serpent, but it protected like a leaf. One good wave could flip it. One mistake with the sail, one misjudged gust of wind, and you were scattered into the sea like broken pottery. And the ocean? It was a god in itself. Not just a path, but a judge, a killer. Sailors whispered prayers before every voyage. Runes were carved into the prow, not for decoration, but for protection. Because everyone knew that once you lost sight of land, you weren't men anymore. You were offerings, raids and robberies. If you don't rob, you are robbed. But you didn't set sail for glory. You set sail for survival. Because the Vikings were many things, but first and foremost, they were pirates, raiders, looters, storms in human form. If you didn't steal, you didn't eat. If you didn't kill, you didn't live. And if you weren't fast, merciless, ruthless, then someone else was. And they'd find your village, your family, your name, and erase it. You arrive at the coast of England, or Francia, or a rival Norse village. You don't knock, you don't warn, you burn. You land silently before dawn, shields glinting, blades ready. You kick down the doors. You take what you need. Silver, food, cloth, people. Yes, people. Slaves. Currency. If you don't take them, someone else will. If you hesitate, you're dead. If you question the ethics, you're dead. If you flinch at the sound of children crying as the flames rise, you are not a Viking. You are a victim. You raid, and then you flee. Before the retaliation comes, before the soldiers arrive. The longship is fast, but it's not invincible. You pray the tide is with you. You pray the gods are with you. You pray you don't tip over in the surf as you run with your loot and your blood and your screams still echoing behind you. And if the raid fails, then you're the one being dragged onto someone else's deck, bound, beaten, branded, sold in a market in Dublin or Hedeby or Constantinople. Your freedom? Gone. Your name? Forgotten. Your body? Now property. And that's... Ifadian, they don't gut you on the beach. The sea doesn't forgive. There are no graves at sea. If you die here, you become nothing. The waves take you, the crabs clean your bones, the salt swallows your story. No funeral pyre, no chanting skalds, no stone cairn, just the wind and the cold and the memory that once a fool dared to sail into the old god's domain and thought he might return. You wouldn't have survived the Viking Sea. Not because you couldn't fight, not because you couldn't kill, but because you couldn't endure the silence between waves, the rot in your feet, the salt in your wounds, the cries of a village you've never seen burning behind you, the guilt or the lack of it, because being a Viking on land was hard, but being a Viking at sea, that was death, over and over, until one day it didn't stop. You wouldn't have survived the village. You think war was the worst part of Viking life? You think only the battlefield was soaked in blood, only the sea was full of death? You think if you just stayed behind in a quiet northern village, you'd be safe? Then let's rip that illusion out of your hands. Because life in the village was no less brutal than war. There were no swords, no shields, no banners, just dirt, disease, bone-breaking labor, and a silence so loud it could drive you mad. War at least gave you a chance to die fast. The village? The village taught you how to rot slowly. Let's start with your job, not your passion, not your career. Your job, the only thing keeping you from starving, freezing, or being cast out like a broken dog. You are a patertor peasant, ursäkta. A kabate Karl, if you're lucky. A land thrall, if you're not. Your job is to wake before the sun, crawl into the grey cold with your teeth chattering and your joints screaming, and work the land that doesn't want to feed you. The ground is stone hard in winter and swamp mud in summer. Your tools are wooden, cracked, splintered. Your hands are raw, blistered, dirt-stained. Your nails are black with rot. 14 hours in a swamp for the sake of barley that a rat will eat. You break your back for barley, for rye, for a handful of turnips. You dry fish until your fingers stink of death. You dig through frost-bitten earth to pull out stunted roots. And what happens then? The rats come. The mold comes. The moisture seeps into your storehouse, and suddenly a whole month of food turns black and soft and foul. You stare at it. You smell it. You eat it anyway. Because if you don't, you die. And even if you do, you might die anyway. You don't get rest days. There's no Sunday nap, no time to dream, no hot bath at the end of your shift. There's only more to do. A fence needs mending. The thatch is leaking again. The goats have worms. The pig died. The neighbor's hut burned down, and now his children are coughing blood in your doorway. And you keep working. You keep pushing. Because if you stop, even once, you fall behind. And always if you fall behind, you die. Life is work. Illness is the end. You wake up coughing. There's blood in it. Your skin is hot. Your stomach knots. Maybe it's the fever. Maybe it's the gods. Maybe it's just life. Doesn't matter. There are no doctors, no medicine, no rest. If you lie down, the animals go hungry. The field is untouched. Your family eats less. So you stand. You stagger. You spit blood and dig with your hands, because the shovel snapped and there's no one left to fix it. And when your vision goes black and you finally collapse in the mud, you are not carried inside with love and ceremony. You are dragged, or left, or stepped over, because everyone else is sick too. You think you'd survive this? You think you'd outlast the swamp fever? The frostbite, the gangrene, the open wound from a broken cartwheel that turns yellow by morning and kills you by sunset? You wouldn't even survive a cold. Now look at the children. Raising children? No, forging them. There are no lullabies here, no soft toys, no glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Your child is born into a world that will try to kill them before their 5th winter. And the only thing you can do to help is make them hard, make them strong, teach them to swing a stick before they can speak, teach them to gut a fish before they can write their name, if they even learn to write at all. Children are not princesses. They're not dreams. They're labor. They're warrior reserves. They're future raiders, future mothers, future corpses. You don't hide the world from them. You shove them into it and hope they come back. You're 10 years old. In the modern world, you'd be watching cartoons. Here, you're herding goats through thorn bushes. You're learning to sharpen a knife. You're helping with the harvest, lifting baskets heavier than your body, being slapped when you drop them. You eat with the adults. You work with the adults. You bleed like the adults. And the training doesn't stop. At 12, you're swinging a real axe. You're standing beside your father at the edge of the forest while he points to a boar and tells you to kill it. Not because he's cruel, but because one day you'll have to hunt alone. And if you can't, you'll starve, or worse, your family will starve, and that's a shame too heavy for a child's bones. You wouldn't even survive the training of a 10-year-old Viking. They build endurance, not memories. They carry firewood in the snow barefoot. They wrestle in the mud, teeth cracking, noses broken, and call it play. They don't get medals. They get scars. And if they cry, they're told to stop wasting time. Because tears don't make bread, and softness doesn't keep wolves away. You still want to live here? Still think a quiet rural life sounds peaceful? Let me tell you what peace really meant to a Viking peasant. It meant no one died that day. It meant no one burned your village. It meant the frost didn't kill your crops. It meant your child didn't choke on their own lungs in the night. That was peace. And it never lasted long. The next storm always came. The next winter. The next bad batch of meat. The next cough. The next raider. The next fire. The next accident. The next mistake. And there was no backup, no hospital, no aid, no one to call. Just your hands, your pain, your fear, your gods, and the dirt you fell into when it was finally too much. You wouldn't have survived the Viking village, because it wasn't peace. It was war, waged slowly, quietly, every day, until you lost. You wouldn't have survived home life in the Viking Age. You imagine home as safety, as peace, as comfort. 4 walls, a roof, a bed, somewhere to collapse, exhale, and forget the outside world. But in the Viking Age, there was no outside and inside. There was no separation between the danger of the wild and the supposed shelter of home. The war didn't end at the doorstep. It followed you in. The cold didn't wait for permission. It slipped through the cracks. Hunger, disease, smoke, sweat, rot. It lived with you. It slept with you. And you wouldn't have lasted a single night in the place they called home. Let's open the door. Let's step into a Viking longhouse. A single room. One low, dark, suffocating room. You duck your head to enter, because the doorway was built to keep out the wind, not to welcome you. Inside, there are no windows, just a single hole in the roof that chokes on its own smoke. The air is thick, oily, heavy. Your eyes water instantly. You blink, you cough, but it doesn't help, because this is what the air is made of. Not oxygen, but smoke, sweat, ash, manure, and meat. There are no rooms, no privacy, no escape. You, your family, your animals, all in one space. Chickens scratch the dirt by your feet. A goat chews something in the corner. You think it's hay. It's not. The floor is earth, packed down, damp and littered with bones, crumbs, hair, feces. You try not to look too close. You try not to breathe too deep. Living in the same room with a goat is the norm, not the exception, not a punishment. It's survival. That goat gives milk, sometimes warmth, and when winter hits and the wind screams through the cracks in the wall, you'll wish you had more goats to curl up with. There are no beds, there is straw, maybe some old hides. You lie next to the hearth, not for ambience, but because if you stray too far from the fire, you will freeze to death in your sleep. That fire, it never goes out. You feed it through the night, dragging yourself from a shallow doze just to shove more wood into the coals. And even then, it's not enough. Your nose burns, your skin cracks, your lungs fill with soot. But it's better than the cold. The cold kills quicker. There is no silence. There is snoring, coughing, moaning, babies crying, rats scratching, wind howling through the thatch. A chicken lays an egg 2 feet from your head. Someone turns in their sleep and kicks you. Someone else wakes up vomiting. You learn to ignore it. You learn to live with it. Because if you complain, you're soft. If you need space, you're weak. You think you could sleep like this? You think you could rest, dream? You wouldn't make it past midnight before the smell alone made you gag. Because it's not just smoke. It's sweat. Stale, unwashed, caked-on sweat from bodies that haven't seen soap in weeks. It's our manure, tracked in from outside, mixed with the smell of wet wool and animal grease. It's our mold, creeping up the walls, growing in your bedding. It's our death, faint and familiar, because someone in the next village passed yesterday and no one had time to bury him yet. And hygiene? Let's destroy that fantasy now. Viking hygiene was not a spa day. It was barely a ritual. Yes, they had combs. Yes, they had baths. But not like you think. Not warm. Not private. Not frequent. Once a week in the bath. Try once a month. Maybe, if you're lucky. You clean yourself in a bucket, in a river, in snow, or not at all. You scrape dirt off your skin with a knife. You wipe yourself with moss. You wash your hands if you remember. But it doesn't matter, because you are always filthy. Everyone is. You carry your licensons like jewelry. You share your fleas with your neighbors. You scratch your fungal infections until they bleed. Your hair smells like smoke and pig fat. Your nails are yellow. Your teeth are black. Your breath is thick. There's no soap, no shampoo, no deodorant. You can't hide the stink. You are the stink. Clothes, wool, itchy, wet, worn day and night. You sleep in what you wear. You wear what you sleep in. It soaks in everything. Sweat, smoke, piss, blood. You peel it off twice a year, maybe. You don't change. You endure. Still think you'd survive a Viking home. Still think it's romantic, rustic, a return to the simple life? Let me tell you something about simplicity. Simple is not kind. Simple is cruel, stripped of its elegance. Simple is waking up, coughing blood in the dark and knowing no one can help. Simple is crawling into a bed of straw beside a dying animal and hoping the fire holds out. Simple is raising your child beside a pile of goat droppings and calling it normal. Home wasn't comfort. Home was containment, a wooden box to hold your body while you waited for the next plague, the next winter, the next war. And when it came, you wouldn't die outside. You'd die all right here. Under your own roof, surrounded by the smell of Norsal smoke, sweat, dirt, and fear. You wouldn't have survived the Longhouse, because you don't know how to live in a world where filth is normal. Privacy is a myth, warmth is a privilege, and every breath tastes like ash. The hearth doesn't welcome you, it burns you, and no one notices. You wouldn't have survived Viking death. Because in your world, death is a ceremony, a tragedy, a moment of silence, a carefully measured grief. In the Viking world, death was background noise, a daily rhythm, a footstep in the snow, an expected guest. It didn't come with warnings or comfort. It didn't arrive with violins or gentle prayers. It came as casually as cold wind through a broken roof, as suddenly as a cough at dawn. And when it arrived, no one was surprised, because death wasn't rare. It was routine. Let's start small. You're walking to the river to fetch water. It's winter. The ice looks thick, but it isn't. You fall through. You gasp. The shock seizes your lungs. You try to claw your way back, but your clothes drag you down. No one hears. No one finds your body, not for days. And when they do, they curse the inconvenience. Dying from an ice break, banality. Happens every year. Nothing poetic. Just another name scratched off the memory list. You're fishing. The waves are calm. You've done this 1,000 times. But this time the boat rocks. A moment of distraction. A slip. You go overboard. The water is glacial. It robs your strength in seconds. You scream, but the sea doesn't care. You vanish. No drama. No heroism, just gone. Drowning while fishing? Usual. Ask around. Everyone's lost someone that way. Your friend dies in childbirth. Your uncle dies from an infected tooth. A child drinks bad water. A farmer bleeds out after an ox kicks his leg sideways. A hunter is mauled by a bear. A traveler doesn't come back. A fire spreads too fast. A roof collapses, a sword slips, a fever grows, a bone splinters, a boil turns black. You stop counting because death isn't a stranger here. It's the neighbor who never moved out. But it's not just how you die, it's what comes after. You dream of a Viking funeral, a ship, flames, smoke spiraling to the gods. But that's a privilege. That's a sort of a status symbol. That's for warriors, lords, jarls, those chosen by the gods or by wealth or by legend. It takes resources, timber, oil, time. And you don't have those things. You are a farmer, a wife, a fisherman, a slave. You don't get the ship. You get the pulp, talor, on ice. No pyre, no songs, no fire licking the sky. Just a hole in the ground, dug with tired hands. Shallow if the earth is frozen. You're wrapped in an old cloak, if anyone has one to spare. Your body is bent, your arms crossed, your eyes half shut. You are placed beside bones, not just human ones. Goat bones, pig bones, trash. The pit is full. It always is. They cover you with dirt, stones, maybe a carved stick. Maybe not. You don't go to Valhalla. You go to the earth. And if the storm is too fierce, if the ground is too hard, if wolves prowl the edges of the village and there's no time, then your body is left outside, covered with snow. You freeze stiff. Animals come. They chew, they scatter, they carry you piece by piece into the trees. In the spring, someone finds your skull and wonders whose it was. The fears don't end with death. They grow. Because Vikings feared the dead. Not death, the dead. They believed that if a body wasn't buried properly, if the rites weren't performed, if the soul was angry or forgotten or shamed, it would rise again. Ashdraga. A corpse walker, strong, mad, hungry. They placed stones on chests, iron scissors on coffins. They tied bodies in knots. They killed their dead twice, once in life, once to make sure they stayed down, because dying wasn't the end of your suffering. It was the start of someone else's. If they buried you wrong, you'd come back. If they remembered you wrong, you'd whisper curses. If they feared you, they'd feed you blood. Sacrifice to keep you quiet. Death had to be negotiated, managed, controlled, and if they failed, you haunted them. Still want to live in the Viking world? Then prepare to watch death walk like a neighbor, to smell it in the walls, to feel it every time someone coughs too hard or slips near the water or doesn't come back from the woods. Prepare to dig graves for friends, for strangers, for children. Prepare to bury a mother and then milk the goats the same afternoon, because there's no pause for grief, no space for mourning. The work doesn't stop. The winter doesn't wait. The gods don't care. You wouldn't have survived the Viking way of death, because you expect closure, and they had only burial, or none. You wouldn't have survived the culture shock of the Viking Age. You think you're adaptable, that you could handle life in another time, that you'd blend in, learn the ropes, earn your place. But you forget one thing. Culture isn't wallpaper, it's weaponry. It's not something you wear, it's something you are. And in the Viking world, the moment you opened your mouth, took a wrong step, wore the wrong color, made the wrong joke, you marked yourself. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, as prey, as an alien, as a threat. And in this world, threats are dealt with swiftly, without hesitation, without mercy. You think you'd be the clever one, the time traveler who keeps quiet, studies the people, wins them over. But you're not invisible. You are obvious. Your posture, your voice, your teeth, your hygiene, your softness, your confusion when someone offers you blood to drink before a battle, your discomfort when you see a child with a scar already forming from knife training, your horror when you witness a man's tongue nailed to a tree for breaking an oath. You flinch, you wince, you harwaus, hesitate. And in this society, hesitation is weakness, and weakness gets punished. Let's talk about moral code. In your world, morality is debated, argued over in comment sections and courtrooms. You say, let's hear both sides. You say, innocent until proven guilty. You say, everyone deserves a second chance. The Vikings said, guilty until dead. There were no trials for treason, no long investigations, no defense attorneys. If you were accused of betrayal, of your jarl, your family, your oath, your clan, the reaction was not procedural. It was immediate. A blade to the throat, a spear through the gut. Maybe they let you speak, maybe they let you bleed. But no one held a vote. No one waited for proof. Your word against theirs? Worthless. Unless your honor outweighed theirs, and if it didn't, then the snow stained red and no one looked back. Honor was more important than life. You say you'd rather live to fight another day. Not here. Here, to retreat was to shame your name, your ancestors, your unborn grandchildren. Here, to show cowardice in battle meant your soul was denied entry to Valhalla. Your body would rot in hell's cold grip. You wouldn't just die. You'd be erased. Stories wouldn't be told about you. Songs wouldn't be sung. You would vanish. A Viking would rather die with his guts in the dirt than live with a stain on his honor. And what was honor? It was everything. It was how loudly you spoke, how firmly you stood, how many feasts you hosted, how many raids you survived, how many enemies you buried, how fast you reached for your axe when insulted, how unshaken you stood before the gods. You think that's outdated? They thought it was sacred. Now imagine you show up with your calm voice, your desire for peace, your polite nods, your modern language, your trimmed beard, your clean fingers. You try to smile when they scowl. You try to laugh when they threaten you, thinking it's just banter. It's not. It's a test, and you're failing. Your language gives you away. You don't speak their dialect. You fumble their proverbs. You misquote their gods. You pronounce names like you're asking questions, not declaring truths. You sound soft, foreign, weak. Your manners give you away. You look someone too long in the eye. You bow when you should have stood. You eat before the elder. You speak before being spoken to. You say sorry. You say please. They don't understand these words. They sound like fear. Your appearance gives you away. Your hands have no calluses. Your skin has no scars. Your gait is straight. Your clothes unlayered. You smell wrong. You stand wrong. You flinch too often. You smile too much. You don't know how to carry a weapon, how to accept an insult, how to offer a toast. You are obvious. And obvious is dangerous. Because difference is threat, or so, and threats are not debated. They are dealt with. You try to explain, you try to reason, you try to talk your way out of it. But you're talking to men and women who were trained since childhood to end lives for less, who believe that peace is the moment before the next raid, who believe that safety is a myth for fools. You try to explain your world, your beliefs, your laws, your values. They stare at you, and then they laugh, or they draw their blades. Still think you'd adapt? Still think you'd learn to fit in? Then try surviving the first meal without offending someone's honor. Try sleeping in a longhouse without insulting the spirits. Try making it through your first insult without reaching for a weapon, and see what they do when you don't. Because they will notice, and they will react. You wouldn't have survived the culture shock of the Viking Age, because they didn't tolerate confusion. They didn't wait for explanations. They didn't forgive difference. And they didn't ask questions after the axe fell. And what if you still survived? Let's pretend. Let's stretch the boundary of belief and say that somehow, through luck, through silence, through the mercy of gods you never learned to name, you survived the first winter. You didn't freeze to death by the hearth. You didn't drown hauling nets. You didn't get your head split open after misunderstanding a toast. You didn't get sacrificed during a bad harvest. Somehow, you endured. A living relic in a world that has no place for relics. So now the question isn't how you died. It's how do you live? How do you adapt? How do you become more than a ghost at the edge of their world? There are no manuals, no mentors, no welcome. You are alone, a stranger, an outsider. Your speech is clumsy. Your knowledge is useless. Your body is soft. Your soul is untested. And yet, you're breathing, which is more than most. So what now? Let's explore your options, because survival in the Viking Age isn't about comfort. It's about transformation, and every path forward is lined with bones. Dash and spy, serve, entertain, or kill. The first option is submission. You offer yourself as a thrall, a servant. You hide your pride. You keep your head down. You scrub floors, salt fish, muck out goats. You let them laugh at you, beat you, spit on your ignorance. You do not complain. You do not falter, because you're playing the long game. You're learning, listening, watching. You become useful, fast, obedient, invisible. You take on the stink of their lives until it becomes your own. And when no one's looking at you, when they stop fearing you, that's when you begin to study their hierarchies, their rituals, their weaknesses. You become a spy in a world that doesn't believe in spies. Or maybe you're not subtle. Maybe you understand quickly that your strength lies not in muscles or memory, but in distraction. So you make them laugh. You juggle. You mimic. You twist your strange language into strange songs. You amuse the children. You annoy the elders. But they don't kill you, because you make their miserable lives a little more absurd. And absurdity is rare here. You become a jester. A fool. But fools often hear what others don't. And behind their laughter, you see the cracks. You learn who hates whom, who drinks too much, who dreams too loudly, who sleeps with whose wife, and you store it all, not for entertainment, for leverage. But let's say you're not made for shadows. Let's say you burn with ambition, with rage, with the terrible need to become someone in this world. Then there is one path left: blood. Because in Viking society, status is taken, not given. If you want to rise, you must bleed for it, kill for it, die for it, again and again, until the gods look away and the people start whispering your name. There is no democracy, no promotion, no HR department to hear your complaints. There is only reputation, and reputation is carved in flesh. You start small, you join raids, you hold the line, you fight harder than you should, because you're still trying to prove you're not prey. You take a wound, then another. Then one day, you don't flinch when the blade touches skin, and the warriors around you nod, not in kindness, but in recognition. You are becoming something that bleeds, but doesn't beg. You kill a man, not in war, in feud, because he insulted you, because he touched your food, because he mocked your past. Doesn't matter. You kill him, and the thing is, no one stops you, because you did it with courage, with fire, and you did it knowing that his family might now come for you. And when they do, and you kill again, suddenly you're not the fool, not the thrall. You are a man with enemies, and in this world, that means you have all power. Now others begin to follow you, not out of love, out of calculation. You survive, you win, you spill blood cleanly. You speak little, but when you do, it's remembered. You're offered a chance to lead a raid, a small one. You return with silver, with slaves, with songs sung in your name, however quietly. Then you betray someone. It's inevitable. You see an opportunity, a rival's weakness, a chieftain's failing, a lord too old to keep his seat. You whisper in the right ear. You promise what you must. You lie. You kneel. And then when the fire burns hot enough, you strike. A knife in the feast hall, a death in the longhouse, blood on the drinking horn. You rise, he falls. You are called Jarl. Maybe not out loud, not yet. But the eyes around you change. They wait for your voice. They follow your path. You have weapons, land, wives, enemies. You've buried half your past. The rest you've burned. But it doesn't end. You must keep killing. Keep watching. Every feast could be your last. every new ally could be your final mistake, because you climbed a mountain made of corpses, and those at the bottom still remember your face. You can't rest. You can't relax. You must never forget that you were once nothing. And still, in the middle of the night, when the longhouse is silent and the wind beats at the walls, you remember your first days, the smoke in your lungs, the blisters, the cold, the eyes that saw you as less than human. And now you are feared. Now you are fire. Now you are them. But don't get comfortable, because in this world the gods watch those who rise, and they often send someone younger, stronger, more desperate, just like you once were. And when he comes, when his eyes burn like yours once did, you'll finally understand what it takes not just to survive, but to stay on top in a place where even death isn't enough to end your story. You wanted to become a Jarl? Welcome to the price.